Now, Martha, don't shake your head like that. You can't tell a better one. No, you can't. Here comes Lindy. All right. Everybody got their outline? If you don't have one, raise your hand. I'll see that you get one. Hope you're filling these out, because for the big test is going to be in a few weeks. All right. Whew. Do I have anything on the black wall there back there, or are you all working on it? I tell you what, you put a deacon and an elder in charge of this thing, and it's not going to work. In fact, you know what a camel? No.
Jerry.
No,
Yeah, just let.
Yeah, you know what a camel
No,
is.
it's time to start.
Yeah, I know. It's a horse made by a committee of deacons.
Thank you. There you go.
If you don't get that thing up, you're fired. You're fired. It's working back there. Not working up here? Oh, no. Okay. All right. We started this conference with on Sunday with the servant heart. And I told you then that's the foundation of basically our whole conference. And that's just very important. And you're going to see that the concept of the servant heart is woven through actually everything that we do. For instance, when we talked about communication, we talked about what you need to understand and how you're going to have to operate and so on, and not so much correcting somebody else. When we dealt with anger and abuse, and we dealt with forgiveness, and again, it starts with you. And that's where all the growth really begins, and that's what the servant heart is so important. When we talked about addictions, and again, you don't blame other people, you actually start with yourself. We're dealing with your own behavior and how do you moderate things and how you work with it. When we take an inventory, we're talking about taking inventory of yourself. We dealt with that in detail. And so this is woven all through everything that we do, and especially tonight. You know, we're not going to talk about how you keep your spouse from stepping out of the marriage. We're talking about you. So in other words, the only person you can control for any length of time is basically yourself. So that's what is basically woven through. What we want to do with you tonight is we're targeting couples who want to make sure an affair is never part of your future. If that's already taken place, then we'll have to work with that. Do I have a clicker, or are you going to do something? Okay.
That's what you get for telling jokes.
Well, no. That's what I get for making him a deacon. That's the problem. That's all. That's what I keep in mind.
I thought as you got older, you might slow down.
I
just
am
a
not
bit
going to
with
slow
that.
down.
No, you're.
I do 120 words a minute with gust up to 210. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, you're doing good. You know, you keep this up, you might get a job. All right, here we go. Now we got this thing and I'm into control. We're talking about the foundation for fidelity. Some general observations. Lynn and I are believers in what's called a cookie theory. The cookie theory simply says, if the cookie is big enough and good enough, you'll take it. Basic then, you know, unless you're God-centered. There was a movie came out several years ago. It's called Indecent Proposal. I didn't see it. I saw the previews. It was a very simple movie. A man offered another man $1 million to sleep with his wife for one night. A friend of mine who was a top CEO in a company said this was discussed in his office among his secretaries and business managers, male and female. And someone said, no, wouldn't ever do that for my spouse. Somebody said, well, could I do that and ask for forgiveness and keep the $1 million? Well, that might be a possibility. All right, here we are, Wednesday night, Maryland Heights, Missouri. Would you be unfaithful to your spouse for $1 million? You sit there and say, oh, no, sir, absolutely not. I wouldn't do it. Okay. What about $1 billion? Now, did you have to think a little bit longer on that one than you did the previous one, okay? We did a conference one time when I said this, and the lady came to me afterwards. She said, when you offered my husband $1 billion, he leaned over and said, I'm still thinking about the $1 million.
I bet he slept on the couch.
He slept on the couch that night. All right, $1 billion, tax-free. Woo, man, look at all the missionaries we could support. Yeah. And then I'll tell you, CFS, it needs some money. And Camp Neotez, you know, oh boy, look at all the things you could do. Now, the reason you might do it might not have anything to do with this, with money. It might have to deal with emotional neediness or esteem or power or position or whatever it might be. We then need to understand the basis of morality. Let me give you the 3 wrong reasons that many times we taught our young people on why they ought to be moral. And that is detection, infection, or conception. In other words, you don't want to be immoral because if you're detected, it's going to embarrass you and the family. You're going to maybe be infected by some kind of disease, or you're going to conceive of something for which you're going to have to be responsible. Now, when you look at all 3 of those, there's really not a biblical reason there. What happens if somebody says, okay, nobody will know, we don't have any kind of infection, and we can take safeguards against conceptions? Your history. It's just a matter of time. The basis for Christian morality, whether you want to start Old Testament, New Testament, is basically a relationship with God. Let's look at 2 passages very quickly. The first one is in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. What you find in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 is the basis of Christian morality is rooted in God. The name of God is used 5 times in this short passage. Look at verse 1, 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. Finally, brothers, we're instructed how you ought to live in order to please God. Verse 3, it is God's will that you should be sanctified, that you should avoid sexual immorality. Verse 5, not in the passion of lust like the heathen who do not know God. Verse 7, for God did not call us to be impure, but to live a holy life. Verse 8, therefore he who rejects this instruction does not reject man, but God who gives you the Holy Spirit. Paul does not argue detection, infection, or conception. He argues relationship with God. Back up to 1 Corinthians chapter 6. Same writer, but he's going to argue just a little bit differently. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, and we will start in about verse 15. Verse 15, do you not know? Now, usually when Paul starts that statement, do you not know, it really means he's saying, don't you know? That's what he means there. Do you not know that your bodies are the members of Christ himself? Shall I take the members of Christ and unite them with a prostitute? Watch his answer. No. Verse 16, do you not know that he unites himself with a prostitute is one with her in body? For he said the 2 will become one flesh, and he unites himself with the Lord is one with him in spirit. Watch verse 18. Flee from sexual immorality. All of the sins a man commits are outside his body, but he who sins sexually sins against his own body. Do you not know? You see the phrase again? Surely you know. Do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you've received from God? You're not your own. You're bought with a price. Therefore, honor God with your body. Sexual relationships outside of a marriage are wrong. I mean, God put it there, but that's where he put it. So those 2 passages would be very important for you. Moving on, causes and counters of infidelity. This come under a large umbrella is the idea of selfishness. The root cause of basically sin is selfishness. When sin is nothing more than making self the supreme object of service. So basically when you look at, and that's why again the sermon we did on the idea of having a servant heart. So when we talk about causes and counters in this particular section, realize they come under a larger umbrella of the idea of selfishness. One of the causes that we have dealt with in our counseling and our work, people say what happened, we simply then grew apart. We simply grew apart. We are convinced that the average household today is probably entirely too busy. Got too many things going on, spinning too many plates, balancing too many balls. And we really don't have time for one another. We don't have time to eat breakfast together. We don't have time to eat supper together. We don't have time to really do anything together. And the modern electronics, folks, has not helped us at all. Mom goes one way, dad another, kids go another way. We've even watched people that go out to eat. They're sitting there and everybody's checking their cell phone out. In other words, they don't have time for one. They don't have time to really interact. Now, what's the counter to this one? You stay or become best friends. You stay or become best friends. It's amazing to us that some couples spend less time together than they did when they were dating, and they wonder why their marriage has gone south. Duh, it's not rocket science, folks. We believe every couple needs to spend at least 30 minutes a day talking and interacting. You say, 30 minutes a day, is that all? Yes. Well, boy, it doesn't sound like much. It's probably been more than you're doing right now. Well, what do you do during those 30 minutes? Guys, I knew you were going to ask. I'm not going to tell you. Until 2 weeks from tonight, we will talk to you about that.
And there is an agenda.
And there is an agenda.
And it will surprise you.
And it will surprise you.
It really
no
will.
doubt about it.
All right.
All right, next.
Next, can you hear me all right? Yes. I'm kind of stopped. Okay, good. The next cause for infidelity is distorted thinking. Distorted thinking. Now let me build on that. Sin distorts truth. Sin distorts reality. Some say that sin occurs when we have a perceived need, legitimate or not, it doesn't matter. It's our perceived need, and Satan gives us an illicit way to fill it. We have a little phrase that we use a lot in and out of our conferences. We've played with it once already. I'll reiterate it here. Anything God makes good, Satan can make bad. Now, don't forget that, because if you can really claim ownership of that, it can save you a lot of grief in this life. Satan creates absolutely nothing. He's the father of lies and distortions, so let's just take him at his word. Honesty becomes what? Dishonesty, right? Love, which is selfless, distorted, becomes lust, which is really wrong, even in a marriage. Why? Because if you really dissect that word, what it is saying is self is a supreme object of service. And we kind of worked with this a little bit a couple of nights. As long as I get what I want, if you're legally and morally mine and you don't like it, you're collateral damage, too bad, deal with it. It flies in the face of the servant heart, of who we claim to be. Do you know that even our very best personality characteristics, distorted, are the most destructive characteristics about us? Yours truly included. Distorted thinking. Throughout the years, we've had really the blessing, because ours is the blessing, to work with many, many people in different phases of life, different stages of married, unmarried, divorced, widowed, or whatever it would be, and certainly all ages. And we have seen this particular principle played out in so many different ways. Now, we're going to use some specific examples in just a few moments, but before we do, let's kind of work with this for just a little bit. I think one of the most common reasons that we have heard from people through the years to explain away immoral behavior, you'll see on your screen, is this: I'm just not happy. I'm just not happy in this relationship, in this marriage, and God loves me. God wants me happy. I'm his child. And I just have one life to live, and I'm just not happy in this marriage, in this life, and God wouldn't want that for me. I'm his child. He loves me. And therefore, I have decided to, or I have, now you fill in the blank. Because if you can imagine it, we've heard it. Now, keep in mind, after you hear something so many times, you kind of develop an answer for that. You know how those of you in business, you know, you hear a problem or whatever, and this is how you do, okay. And so through the years, I'm guilty. I'm not sure he would be, but I'm guilty. I'll claim it. And by the way, I will tell you, through the years, and still now, but when I actually worked as a therapist before I married him, and before we started all of this.
What, you said him?
This wonderful, wonderful blessing from God
Thank you.
that God has given me.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Okay, are you happy?
Happy.
Happy. All right.
I can sing my little light.
No, you're not singing your little light. All right. Where was I?
You were saying what a wonderful person I was.
No, okay. The years that and still, when we're on the road, when we work with a couple, or even into anybody, the Bible is front and center. Because even all those years ago, as a therapist, I found out that if I couldn't use the Bible, I didn't have much to say. Because anything else I would say would really be a subjective call, right? What I was thinking, and so I had to have some line of demarcation. Now, people might agree, and that was okay. I'm not saying I had everything right. That's not it at all. But I had to have something that was baseline. And so after I would hear that comment, I'm not happy, speaking to a client, just like I'm speaking to you, I would say this. You know, I've studied this book for a long, long time, and I have a problem, and I really would like you to help me solve it. I personally have never been able to find the verse in this book that tells me my purpose in life is to be happy. Would you find it for me, please? And I handed them the book. I never said another word until I was spoken to. You see, I've really learned to keep my mouth shut when I need to. I think the shortest time I waited was about 10 minutes. The longest time was several weeks. They wanted to do the research, talk to someone, find out what the Greek would say. I encouraged that because the lesson I wanted to teach was worth waiting to teach. Ladies and gentlemen, 100% of the time, and we still have never seen an exception, they would sit in front of me, whether it was moments or weeks later, smiled rather sheepishly and say, well, you know, I thought it was in there, but I just couldn't find it. That was my cue. At that point, I led them into a discussion about how the book says a lot about a little word joy that comes from doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. That's how you can truly be joyful when your life is falling apart. And we would look at several scriptures. And the book says a lot about our purpose in life. And really, if you combine it all, it comes down to choosing a relationship with the one that put us here. And I'm not talking about biological parents. And choosing to reflect his love for us to each other. And we would look at many other passages, but what is still so amazing to me, the word happy, the way we use it in our language in reference to us as individuals, is not in the book. It's not there. Occasionally it's translated blessed, right? But that is not the way we use the word in our language. It's not. When we are thinking about someone being happy, what exactly are we thinking about? Well, we're thinking about basically what is going on in their life at that moment in time. And that means how everyone is treating them, what their health is doing, what their job situation is, what the economy is, the weather, the political scene, the world scene, the children, all the relatives, all the friends, and all of those things plus are filtering through my mental, my physical, my emotional, and spiritual health at that moment in time. Now, I lost track of the variables, and I could have gone on, but do you get the idea? Those things are constantly in flux, aren't they? They really are. They're constantly changing. Now, take it to its end result in our discussion tonight. I guarantee you, if your marriage survives the decades, what you are just sure is going to make you deliriously happy at age 21 or 23 or 25, you're sure whatever is going on right there is going to make you deliriously happy for the rest of your, hopefully, decades and decades-long marriage, you're wrong. Because every day we're changing. And that doesn't mean that hopefully our core beliefs change, but we're becoming different people every day. And you kind of have to fight to maintain relationships in all ways. We're going to talk about that in other sessions. Because what I'm confident is going to totally make me happy and fulfill whatever I want in a mate at 22. I guarantee you it's going to change by the time I'm 35. It's going to change again by the time I'm 47. It's going to change again by the time I'm 59, 68, 74, 89. And if I am dependent upon another person to make me happy, the way I define happy at this moment in my life, let me tell you something. There is a very high probability that I'm going to go through a lot of people and a lot of relationships, illicit or not, in my lifetime. Ladies and gentlemen, do not make joy and happy synonyms. We use them interchangeably, but we should not. Joy is like the current that's deep beneath the ocean's surface. Happiness is the wave that would crash on the shore and then recede. They are not the same.
Have you noticed the world of advertisement? You're one product away from happiness. If you would have this product, you'd be happy. And just like the great theologian Phil Robinson says, happy, 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 happy. Junior, if he'll get this present, he'll be happy. And he's happy for about a day. Then he gets in an argument with his brother over the box the toy came in. What's out on your next carport sale, garage sale? What you thought was going to make you happy? Happiness is wanting what you have, not having what you want. And you need to understand then the difference, and that's what Lynn is saying.
Okay. The second that we've heard a lot, succinctly put, it's not my fault. Or you could say refusal to accept responsibility for one's own choices. Again, I can only speak for myself. One therapist, one part of the country, but I'm old. I like to say that. It gives me permission to be real. All right. I can say honestly, as far as I'm concerned, through the years, I have never, and I'm sure other therapists have, but I have never had the following experience. I have never had anyone sit in front of me and say, my wife is a good woman, or my husband is a good man, and I have, and you fill in the blank, and I accept total 100% responsibility. Personally, I've never had that experience. Very often, I have had the experience, my wife is a good woman, or my husband is a good man, but, and then the contingency statements would start. But she shouldn't have gained those 5 pounds after those 8 children. She had no right. She knows I'm visually oriented. Did she honestly, realistically think I wasn't going to look the other way? Or he plays golf 3 times a year. Huh? How selfish can he be? If he thinks for 1 minute, I'm going to sit around this house and wait on him, he can just think again. Well, I'm being a little facetious here, but I think you get the idea. It was not unusual at all for an individual to admit they had made a bad choice, but in the next breath, someone else was highly responsible for that. Sometimes it was a spouse, sometimes it was a friend, sometimes it was a parent, mental health, whatever it would be. Ladies and gentlemen, I alluded to it last week, and we'll really get this idea next week. It's Parenting 101, I know, but we work with a lot of personality stuff. The human personality is built in the shape of a pyramid. We've talked about this, and the base of the pyramid is what? The accident of birth, correct? And the accident of birth are the voices we hear the first, birth, the 5-7 years of life, the shoulds, the oughts, the have-tos, the musts, squeeze a toothpaste tube, resolve conflict, whatever it would be, plus the genetics pre-wired into us. The accident of birth, because nobody votes on the early voices that rear us, and nobody votes about our genetics that are pre-wired, correct, personality-wise. I will be the very first to admit to you that there are many, many people that got a hard deal down here. We live in a fallen world, and genetics go awry, people go awry, we hurt ourselves, we hurt each other, right? Like I said last week, we're all playing this game called life, and we're playing it with different cards. But while we cannot help the things that happen down here, we're adults, right? And we are totally responsible for the choices we make, regardless of the rest of the stuff. And even if our relationships keep sabotaging or whatever, hopefully we have a heart that would lead us to some good resources to help us figure out what in the world's going on. Why is this the case? But I never knew it. It was always, always someone else's fault. We could really sit here for, we won't, for quite a while and just go through real case after real case after real case after real case that have crossed our paths through the years, and they break our heart. I will share, like I indicated, just a few very specific cases. Now, these are real people, real places. And don't try to figure out who they are. You'll never get there. There's absolutely no way you would ever get there. I'm going to choose church leaders. It's not right. It's not fair, but it seems when church leaders or individuals in a position of teaching, leadership, whatever it would be, when they fall, the collateral damage is worse. And it shouldn't be that way, but it is. Okay, real life situation. I was working with an elder who married, having an affair with another elder's wife. She had filed for a divorce, he had filed for a divorce, and their plan was to go ahead through with the divorces and then start worshiping at a fellowship down the road. And I was working with him, and I wasn't getting anywhere. And I hate to do this, but I'm not above playing the child card if I see that I'm not getting anywhere. And I looked at him and I said, I understand you have 3 teenage sons. And he just grinned. And he said, oh yes, and they are so wonderful. And I said, I also understand they're good kids. He said, they really are. They're good kids. And then I said, I guess you know that what you're doing, divorcing their mother, just because you're not happy, you're emotionally estranged, you're one out, is really going to hurt your children, your boys, and they're good boys. And without missing a beat, he looked at me and he said, Lynn, I know what I'm doing is going to hurt my boys. But let me tell you something, I'm not like a lot of other people, I'm not. Because when my boys are messed up, I'm gonna be there for them. And I looked at him, and I was kind, but I was firm. And I said, why don't you just get your act together and not mess them up to begin with? Working with a deacon's wife, having an affair with another deacon, married, another congregation somewhere, whatever. And this is what she said True stories. You can't make this stuff up. But you see the distortion? You see what Satan, it makes perfect sense to people. I'll tell you why in a moment. And this is what she said. You see, Lynn, my husband and I were having marriage issues. And so we were going to marriage counseling. But I really thought my lover needed equal time. So for every hour I was going to marriage counseling with my husband, I was going to relationship counseling with my lover. And at that point, those of you that are old enough, you beam me up, Scotty, just I'm living in the matrix here. I mean, it's crazy making stuff. I mean, it made sense to her. I think still to this day, the most bizarre case I ever heard, and it was well over 35 years ago now, I was working with an elder's wife having an affair with a married preacher in a city 90 miles away. And this is what she said. Lynn, what you need to understand about me is that I have such a high moral nature. My moral code is so strong that I just can't stay married to my husband when I'm in love with another man. And I remember, I thought, Lynn, for once in your life, shut your mouth. Don't say anything. Don't breathe. Don't blink your eyes. Just sit still, and she will hear the fallacy in her reasoning. And she just stared very blankly at me. And then I'll never forget, you know that feeling you get when you think you're going to be sick in your stomach? And I really thought I was going to be sick. And I'll never forget the feeling that came over me, and I thought, have we truly now become a culture where we excuse our immorality with our morality? If so, God help us all. Ladies and gentlemen, I am convinced, we are convinced, that it doesn't matter what a person says they believe. If they want to do something badly enough, they will decide that it is God's will for their life.
Okay, say that one again. We've heard this so many times.
If a person wants to do something badly enough, Satan, the father of lies and distortions, will enable them to create a rationale in their mind that it is God's will for their lives. What's the counter to distorted thinking? Trust the Bible over mind and emotion. Trust the Bible over mind. Is it not up there?
It's not up there. Maybe now.
Maybe.
Yeah,
there we go. All right. Trust the Bible over mind and emotion. Ladies and gentlemen, there will be many times in all of our lives what we think is right is really wrong. It's the truth. I am not a pilot, but I'm told by those that pilot aircraft that there is an experience called spatial disorientation.
Years ago, I received my pilot's license after going through some training. And in order to get your license, you have to go through what's called a check ride. So I flew down from Searcy to Little Rock, and the person who's going to give me the check ride got in this little Cessna 150 that we had. And we got about 3,000 feet, and he had put a hood over my head, so all I could do was see the instruments. And so this is called, flying by the instruments. In other words, it's not the visual rules. We're flying along there, and he said, all right, Mr. Jones, give me a medium bank turn to the left. I said, okay. He said, what did I tell you to do? I said, medium bank turn to the left. He said, what are you doing? I said, medium bank turn to the left. He says, what's that ball and needle indicate over on the right-hand side? I said, it's indicating I'm doing a medium bank turn to the right. He said, well, how do you figure that out? How do you understand that? I said, well, that thing is wrong. He said, take your hood off. And guess what? I was doing a medium bank turn to the right, and I just knew it was to the left. In the little Cessna 150, it's only a two-seater. He stuck his finger right in my face. And so don't you dare ever do that again. He said, you believe those instruments until you fly it straight into the ground. And that's what Lynn's talking about.
Don't forget the spiritual analogy. There will be many times every one of us is in a spiritual disorientation. What we think is right is really wrong. What we think is wrong is really right. Up is down, down is up. One more time. If at any point in your life, what you think you want to do, what you feel like you have to do, what feels so right to do, ladies and gentlemen, if it goes against the book, just don't do it. Just don't do it, or you'll fly your life right into the ground.
We move on now to another segment of this presentation, anatomy of an affair. Now, there are actually three types of affair. Two of them we will not deal with tonight. The first one we'll not deal with tonight is what we call the one-night stand. Person goes away, maybe on a business trip, makes a bad choice, his heart is broken, it's never ever repeated. The second affair that we will not deal with is what we call the affairs of the true sex addict. These are multiple in nature, span years, and span partners. Unless you're working with a mental illness, these affairs are spawned from deep unmet emotional needs from childhood, which we talked about last week, or the fear of emotional intimacy in adulthood. And we dealt with that one last week. The one we will deal with tonight are the ones that grow out of friendship, from emotional closeness, and they look innocent, but they are very, very lethal. And that's the one we will deal with tonight. What we're going to share with you tonight is the theory of attraction that you would learn in any psychology class. Then there's nothing wrong with the theory of attraction. However you put it into a marital situation, you have something that can be extremely dangerous. Remember, the Bible talks about there's a way that seems right unto man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. And here again, you might not say, well, I don't know if I appreciate the Bible and so on. Listen, I didn't write this book, folks. I didn't write this book. I didn't write these letters. I'm just the mailman. I'm just telling you what's going on. And see, this book will teach you that sin distorts reality, sin distorts truth. And anything that we talked about, God makes good, Satan can make bad. We're going to ask every individual in this audience tonight to be honest with yourself. I want you to listen as we go through this 6-step model. Now, here again, there might be something going on in your life and you don't even realize it. You're not even cognizant of it. But it could be a very dangerous situation. First of all, first step is attraction. Just because you wear a ring on the left hand does not mean you're not attracted to members of the opposite sex. There is blood that runs through your veins. Welcome to the human race. That is going to happen. Why? Because we're humans. You can't help sometimes for the attraction, but you can help what you do beyond that attraction. Secondly is proximity. You are in that person's work arena. It might be a work arena. It might be a recreation. It might be social. It might be religious even. It might even be neighbors. In others, somehow, some way, you have found yourself in that person's arena. And it could be then a number of ways. Now, all these steps that we give you on the 6-step model, they're not stagnant. They're basically flow then one to another.
And by the way, this model is exactly how you met and married your present spouse, those of you that are married.
Yes.
This is the exact same model. It's just in a marital relationship, it turns into something very, very different. The third step is interaction. That's just a psychobabble word, and that means that we're interacting with each other, right? We're social people. We need people. We're relational at our core, and we interact with people in all the arenas of our life. Certainly in the religious arena, fellowship together, Bible classes together, groups together, worship together, retreats together. And so certainly we have the spiritual arena, and anyone that holds a job interacts with other people, correct? Absolutely, that's the nature of a vocation. You're working with other people. And so you have the vocational arena, and then you have the social arena. People that we know casually in our neighborhoods, just in passing, whatever it would be. And the fourth the physical or the recreational arena, as America becomes more and more health conscious, we have more and more co-ed softball leagues, tennis leagues, pickleball leagues, golf leagues, basketball leagues, you go on and on and on. Oh, and the fitness centers. The fitness centers. And anyone that has ever worked out in a fitness center is very aware of the fact that the burn doesn't burn as badly if you talk to someone while you're burning. Now, we leave absolutely nothing to chance. There's some definite red flags. Please listen to Jerry.
Well, number one is anticipation. You get up in the morning and you're going to see that individual. Maybe you're going to see him at work. Maybe you're going to see him at the fitness center. Maybe you're going to see him at church. Or maybe you're going to see him in the neighborhood or when you pick up the kids from school. And you think, well, boy, this is going to be a good day because I can see this individual. Secondly, you want to make sure you look good. I mean, you don't put on old grubby stuff. I mean, you make sure your appearance is attractive in some ways. And then location. You manipulate things so you just happened to meet. Walk the dog the same time, pick up the mail the same time, pick up the kids the same time, work out the same time, same Bible class. Just happen to be in Bible class together. You say, attaboy, Jonesy. That's why I don't come to Bible class. There's just a bunch of people having affairs in there. That's what it is. All right, you going to get honest with me or you going to play games? Is there somebody not your spouse that you know you're going to be excited to see them? You dress in a certain way and you manipulate things so you happen to cross paths. You're talking about a slippery slope, folks.
And Satan whispers in your ear, it's okay. It's okay. We're just good friends. The next step is disclosure. Sometimes it's called self-disclosure. And it occurs when the interaction goes beyond the casual interchange, whether it would be in the religious arena, the vocational, or the recreational, or the social arena. And it progresses to the point where one of the individuals begins disclosing personal things about himself or herself. Almost always, this involves problems with the marriage, complaints and problems with a spouse. Now, this is a very crucial step because when this occurs, an emotional bond is beginning to form. And the self-talk, the talk in one's mind that might precede the actual disclosure itself, might sound just a little bit like this.
You know, my wife and I, we're having difficulties and we can't communicate. She yells at me and I just yell back at her, or she goes and pouts or I pout. I mean, we're having trouble getting along, that's for sure. And I don't know what to do. I don't want to live this way the rest of my life. None of my buddies, I'm not going to talk to them about it. They don't much more than I do. I don't know. I tell you what I need to talk to a woman because it takes a woman to understand a woman. But who in the world would I talk to? Oh, I got an idea. Last December, we went up on a ski trip up in Colorado with a bunch of people from church and a bunch of families and couples. And I remember sitting around the fire at night in the lodge, and this lady was talking about all the people she works with and how she's helping couples. And I'm thinking about, boy, I need some help. I might need to talk to you. And she knows my wife, and maybe she could help me because Christians ought to help Christians, that's for sure. And I think I'll just give her a quick call and maybe she can give me some insights of what to do.
I don't know what's wrong with my marriage. I love my husband. That's not it. He just doesn't have time for me. He's busy, you see. Oh, he has time for sports, time for his hobbies, his friends. whatever he wants to do. He just doesn't have time for me. I tell him I'm lonely. He tells me to quit complaining. I'm glad I have my job. I love my job. The hours at work are so much nicer than the hours here at home. My boss is a great guy. He always has time for me. He listens, he asks questions, he's respectful, he's kind. He asks my opinion. He's offered to help all of us that work in that department, help us with whatever. I'm not sure he meant marital problems. But then, you know, maybe he did. I've met his wife. She's a nice woman. He seems to have a good marriage. Maybe he could give some insight. Be great being married to a guy like that. Maybe if I just kind of explained what was going on. If he couldn't help, I know he would at least sympathize, validate me, make me feel better. Don't look at me that way. Everybody deserves somebody. All I want is a little male attention. And I deserve that. My husband doesn't want the job. My boss is a nice man, and he likes me. Maybe he can tell or help me, but I really don't care if he can or not, because I like him, and I like his company. Disclosure. The next step is equity. It occurs after disclosure with one or two results. Initially, the person who has been disclosed validates the discloser. Did you get all those disclosing words? Statements like, that's awful. I don't know why you live with that. You shouldn't put up with that. You're a better person than that. You shouldn't live in that. You can do better. And the person who has been disclosed to now discloses back. A solid emotional bond is now formed. Problems with his or her marriage. Problems with his or her spouse. And equity, after it has transpired for just a really short period of time, at the very beginning of it, might sound like this.
Lynn, I really appreciate this time you spent with me. You have been so helpful to me, and you've convinced me I'm not as bad a husband as my wife makes me to be, and you've given me some real good suggestions, and I think that's good. And then after we met a couple times, and then you began sharing me that your marriage is not all that good either, and hopefully I've been helpful to you. And I think, you know, maybe God brought us together to help one another.
Your friendship means a lot to me. In fact, it's one of the most positive things I have going in my life. You're a good man. You really, really are. I really look forward to our conversations. Your wife is really a lucky woman, you know. She doesn't know what she has. As equity progresses, you become a better friend to this person than you are to your own spouse. Did you hear what I said? You are now a better friend to this person than you are to your own spouse. Step 6.
We call it here.
Oh, emotional adultery. I'm sorry.
Okay, anytime you feel a member of the opposite sex, not your spouse, better understands you than your spouse does, you're in trouble. When you find yourself daydreaming about what would it be like to be married to them rather than the one I'm married to now, you are in double trouble.
Step 6 is a step that breaks the heart, many times severs the marriage, appears on a divorce decree. But ladies and gentlemen, it is just a tiny step from step 5, emotional adultery, to step 6, physical adultery. You didn't mean it. You love your spouse. You just wanted someone to eat lunch with, hang out with at coffee break, share jokes with, just kind of talk with. What happened? Oh, you needed to help them. They needed counseling. They needed someone to study the Bible with them. They needed God in their life. You see how this goes? What happened? Satan, the father of lies and distortions, took something that was fine when you weren't married and your spouse wasn't either, has distorted it and moved it now into the marital arena. Ladies and gentlemen, there is only one counter.
2 Timothy 2 and verse 22, Paul tells the young preacher, flee immorality. Run the other way as fast as you can go. You say, well, I know how far I'm going and I'm not going to go. No, wait a minute. There's a good possibility you have already crossed a line you said you would never cross. And let me say something that in our experiences, many times in an affair situation, let's say the man has the affair, his wife then knows the woman. That's why even between Christian couples, folks, there are lines to which we need to draw over which we will not cross.
Absolutely.
And then you say, you're pretty emphatic. Yes, I'm emphatic because our experience tells us that this is a lot of bit of the problem. And you say, well, it won't happen to me. We've heard that one before, too. Now, what's the counter to this? Let me back up with this thing. You say, well, you've nailed me. What am I going to do? You're going to have to, okay, no more cell phone calls, no more emails, no more chance meetings. I mean, it's over with, period, done with. You might have to change jobs, you might have to change locations, you might have to change churches. But my question is, how important is your marriage? What are you willing to do? Now, we can sit here and convince you intellectually that what you're doing is wrong, but your emotions will trail your intellect every time.
You want to repeat that? Because that's good.
Your emotions will trail your intellect every time. We've in premarital counsel, we have talked with a couple, and all of a sudden this woman decides that she's engaged this man, but the marriage wouldn't work. She gives the ring back and cries for 6 months. Intellectually, she knows it wouldn't work, but her emotions are trailing her intellect. If you decide this thing based upon emotions, folks, game's over.
Really is.
The game is over. You say, well, I don't go for it. Okay, if what you're doing, I could videotape it and put it up here on the screen, what would you think about it? You see what I mean? Satan is taking you far, far away, and you didn't even realize that what was going on was taking place. And that's why these things we've given is so important. Genesis 39 is a story of a man we know of Joseph. The Bible says, now Joseph was well-built and handsome. He's a hunk. You got that? Potiphar's wife then says, come to bed with me. That's pretty plain. I mean, they know what the intentions are and what's going on. Now, watch what happens and takes place. One day he went to the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants were inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, come to bed with me. But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. Ran, R-A-N, not to be confused with skip or walk. I mean, Jack, I'm out of here. That's what I'm saying. That's what's going to have to take place. Now, we're going to close this session out with an ounce of prevention. We're going to give you 3 quick suggestions. Number 1, safety in numbers. 2 is company, and 3 is then security. We believe that your spouse should know what you're doing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In other words, there's no hidden times. There's no hidden passcodes or anything else. Anytime a person is not accountable for his money or his time, I'm saying something's going on that should not be going on. Those things in the area of accountability. Gentlemen, if you're at a workplace and this lady wants to, well, I need some counseling or help. You know, look, I'm not a counselor, but I know somebody that could. Her name is Lynn Jones. We'll refer to her. Okay? Most of the time, gentlemen, when you're saying that, I hate to be crude about it, but she's shopping.
She really is.
She's shopping.
She is.
Now, it can go the other way too. I understand that. But see, here again, once you cross over that line and get into personal things, then you're basically in trouble all the way.
All right, let me add just a little bit. Gentlemen, if a woman approaches you and you see where this is headed, women are sly. I are one, as they say, but oh my goodness. Anyway, it's been that way from the beginning, right? If she says you're the only one that can help her, just say, well, you know, my wife is, or whoever is really good with this. Let's call her in on this. That'll put an end to it. And ladies, the same with you. Well, I really don't, but my husband's really good with this, or I know a guy that's really good with this. All right? We realize in a real world, dual learning households, that there are times when you must work with a member of the opposite sex, because that's the way it is. That's life. Remember the model. Remember the 6-step model. Keep the conversation on things that are not personal, because once you cross that line and start talking about your spouse or problems in the marriage or whatever it would be, you're one step closer to disaster in your marriage. And so just be very, very wise. 24/7 rule, you should be able to give your passwords to everything to your spouse without having been asked, or have the same passwords to everything. No hidden accounts, no, unless there's an addict working somewhere. All right, no hidden phones, no email, Facebook, nothing. It's an open book. Next, a hug or a hug. You can tell by the words I've written there is a difference. I myself am a hugger. I love touch. But there's a correct way to do that. There's an incorrect way to do that. Generally speaking, and ladies, you probably know about all this, but gentlemen, you have a great heart. But just in case you don't know how this works generally, I keep saying, with a member of the opposite sex, a loose front hug, it's called an A-frame hug, or a loose side hug with an elbow appropriately placed would be fine. A tight front hug or a tight side hug is almost always inappropriate. I am not questioning your integrity or your intent, motivation. No, I'm not. But what I am saying is perception is reality. You never know how what you think is a very innocent gesture is being perceived by somebody else. And trust me, some people have very, very vivid imaginations. They can write entire romantic scenarios into a gesture that you didn't think twice about. Just like many of you, I have worked in the secular work world. And it never ceased to amaze me the games that married people play with married people, single people, anybody that'll play. It's nothing more than junior high flirting. You know, the subtle eye contact, the stolen jokes, the hidden meanings of words, the shared innuendos, glances, all of that stuff. Nothing more than junior high flirting. Some people even flirt to the extent that they have imaginary conquests, maybe as imaginary badges that they wear. Oh, they don't sleep around. But in their mind, if they wanted to, they have a huge smorgasbord from which to choose. Actually, psychologically, that's very unhealthy for one of two reasons. Either the person is that narcissistic and they think they're that great, or they have a really poor self-esteem and they're using other people to bolster it. You know nothing. You don't want either one. Once in a while, working with people, someone will come into me and they will make a comment like, members of the opposite sex are always coming on to me. Now, I am not into the blame the victim. I'm not. And depending upon how this person is presenting, there is a possibility I will look at this individual and say, is there a possibility that you are sending a message that you're a player? By the way you talk, the way you walk, the way you dress, the way you handle your body language. Some people don't play, but you'd never know it by looking at them. I don't care how good looking you might be, it doesn't matter. There's a way you cut your eyes, there's an inflection you put in your voice, and there's a way you handle your body language, and it says without saying one word, I don't play. Don't even think about it, I don't play. It's not rude, but it is never wrong. And by the way, gentlemen, a word to the wise here. If your wife says there is a female that is too attentive to you, listen to her. Women know women. We have antenna going on all the time. Beep, 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 beep. We can spot a player a mile away. We can. So if your wife says there is a female too attentive to you, you don't argue with her, you don't rebuttal, you don't tell her that she's paranoid. You say, yes, ma'am. And you establish those boundaries. And by the way, ladies, if your husband says there is a man that's paying too much attention to you, you already know about it, so just cut it out, all right? Enough said.
Woo! Let's go on to the third one quickly. You need to do an I do every day. Do not let your spouse, you should tell your spouse how much you love and appreciate him every day. Well, I can't remember to do it. Write it on your hand. Doesn't come naturally. I don't care. Do it till it does, all right? I tell you what, I tell you the counseling point we've never had. We've never had a woman come to us and said, my husband tells me about 25 times a day how much he loves and appreciates me, and I'm getting sick and tired of hearing it. How in the world do I shut the old coot up? We've never had that problem. She's told every day. I'm told every day. I do every day.
And finally, finally, flying solo. Kind of an odd topic to end this session, but we find it's very necessary. In an ideal world, if you are married, hopefully your spouse is as intent as you are in being the man or woman of God that he or she is called to be. And you know what happens? Closer you get to your Creator, what's going to happen? You're going to get closer together. But it's not an ideal world. It's far from it. And I know among the people that are listening to us online or here tonight, there are individuals that are flying solo. They're married, but they are flying solo emotionally, and they're flying solo maybe spiritually. Now, from this point forward in the rest of the session, I am only talking about emotional estrangement. Everybody got that? I am not talking about addictions, adultery, and abuse, those things. We've already talked about that won't be addressed. Remember, sometimes you must sever a marriage because it is literally the course of the least amount of damage. You've got to save yourself and your children. And sometimes there's just all kinds of, I'm only talking about emotional estrangement. Initially, if you find yourself in that particular situation, acknowledge the fact that it is not your job to change your spouse or to make him or her holy. I think one very popular author says you're not your spouse's personal Holy Spirit. Well said. I assume if you've been married any length of time, the arguments have been had. The tears have been shed. You have done the pleading. You've cried. You've begged. All that stuff. In other words, your spouse knows how important your faith is to you. I would advise you, and Carolyn is the walking example of this, to let your life be your argument. Don't go over and over the same things, making everybody's life miserable. Your life, and that's by Albert Schweitzer, by the way. I've decided at last to let my life be my argument. Your life will speak much louder than your words will anyway. And finally, make God your spouse. I remember the first time I had that, I thought I was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard in my life. I did. I was 23 years old, been married 3 years, Tulsa, Oklahoma, at a women's retreat. I don't remember anything about the female speaker other than at that point I thought she was really old. Now that's ludicrous because as I reflect, she was much younger than I am now. But, you know, when you're 23, anything over 35 has had it. Okay, and she was really old, I thought. And I don't remember anything she said, but she said this: ladies, if you ever find yourselves emotionally estranged from your husbands, you've just got to make God your spouse. And at age 23, I thought that was absolutely ridiculous. How in the world did anybody do that? And I dismissed it. Well, not 23 anymore. Been around the block lots of times. Lots of times. Life has happened. And I'll be quite honest, Jerry and I have been blessed hundreds and hundreds of times over through the decades, running into these people everywhere we go. They're magical. They're magical. There's an emotional estrangement, many times a spiritual separation, but God really is their spouse. What does it come from? It becomes to not focus on what they're not getting. As Jerry indicated at the first of this session, this entire thing, our whole conference is centered around the servant heart of the individual. Our culture is so into reciprocity, right? I'll do this, you do this. I'll do this, you do this. I'm not doing one more thing because the score's 5-7 and you owe me. Forget that stuff. You will do, I will do, Jerry will do what is right because of who we are, who we belong to, regardless of what anyone else does. And when a person really gets to that point, there is a peace and really a joy that passes any understanding. I'll close with this. If you are on the verge of ending your marriage because of emotional estrangement, or if you ever find that, you're probably on the verge of making the greatest mistake of your life. You think you've seen pain. You haven't begun to taste it yet. You haven't. I would beg you, I would implore you, I plead with you. Remember the words of that wise woman so many, many decades ago. I don't even remember her name now, but praise God, she walked this earth. God will enable you to do what you don't think you can do, maybe even what you don't want you to do. But ladies and gentlemen, look beyond yourself, look above, die holding true to your covenant, die holding true to your God. You won't be sorry that you did.
Next week, Parenting 101 will be our subject, and
Right.
that will be week number 7 of our conference. And we just have next week and then the following week after that. You're visiting with us tonight. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you for bringing your kids, but you need to go get them now.
And thank the child care people.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle.
Thank you,
We'll
and
see
be
you
safe.
next week.
Okay.